Welcome to the Life Burst Podcast review. Oh, we're not doing a review episode. That's right. We're doing the deck tech episodes, where we're going to talk about the different decks that you can play in this format with the new Divas that have been added, the new Lrigs. And the first one that we're going to start with is Ray Wings of Supremacy. And I've got two different brews to show you guys, depending on which ones you prefer. One is a little bit more control-ish, and the other one is a little bit more tempo, more aggressive, let's say, than the other one. So we'll start with the more aggressive one. I won't go over in depth the what Ray does. If you want to watch that episode, you can always go to the set review and check out more about it. But just to recap, Ray's abilities are basically, if you can draw two or more cards off of an effect this turn, not the cards that you draw, you can pay blue and colorless. And if you do that, you can, on the attack phase, bottom a Signy that's level 2 or less. It's also got the enter ability of draw a card to enter charge 1. And it is got a once a game ability, which is that you can discard your hand. If you do, for every blue card that you've discarded, the opponent has to discard a card. So we're going to create two decks that are maximizing those effects. One, we want the clock that comes with Ray, the ability to just every turn bottom something, so that way we can keep attacking in and having an open lane. And we inevitably want to make that once a game ability good. And there is a tricky way that we can do it in both these decks that enable it very much so. But we'll start with the first one. And don't worry, guys, I know there's some Japanese cards in here. They haven't given us the English versions yet, but I've tested these decks pretty thoroughly against the old metagame, against new metagame tech, and I think these are pretty competitive and can stand up. Both of these Ray builds I would put in the optimal camp. But if we start completely in the Lrig land here, we use Akino Rock and Akino Bye Bye. These are the standard tech that you usually use in No Limit. They're very good, they're aggressive, they're nice bounce, so they're all catch-all removal. And you'll always sort of have an open lane with them to be able to go to. Plus, Akino Bye Bye gives you a little bit of extra defense, getting yourself a guard back again at some point. The Hirana on stage is also more aggression here. It just vanishes target level 2 or less on the opponent's field. But we've got a new Hirana. And if we go over to here, I can explain what that Hirana is. Just give me a moment. Boop, here it is. That's Hirana's stamp. So what it says is that it has a attack phase and a main phase timing, and the enter ability is vanish target Signy with on the opponent's field with power 12,000 or less, which is actually quite high. It's sort of a very catch-all. For one enter, mind you, is very, very good. It's got this other ability too, where it can cost 5 colorless, and during your opponent's turn, your opponent can't pay the enter costs of 1 or more, which is incredibly strong, but you're never really going to have the 5 enter for it to pull off. So that is like, you're going to almost 99% of the time use this for it's just 1 enter vanish something, and then occasionally use it, and by occasionally I mean very rarely, use this last ability. So I wouldn't even consider it when you're thinking about deck building. But it is important to recognize that a 1 mana attack phase timing vanish basically anything is incredible, and that's why you're going to be using that in this deck. And then the last two things that you're using in the Lrig deck is going to be Glory Grow, just because it puts forth so much damage, and the being able to not guard can maybe guarantee you the win. You guys have played Hirana before, you know that it's a very strong card. You might as well just play it for raw power level alone. And it doesn't usually finish up games right away like Hirana does, where it's winning on turn 3 or 4. This deck usually wins on turn 4 or 5. So it's a little bit slower, but it has some tools to make up for that speed. The next piece is going to be Song of Wixoss, and I actually will have this in both the decks. I think this is a very strong piece specifically for Ray, because it does some things that Ray likes that other decks might not be able to use to full advantage. Song of Wixoss allows you to its use condition is that there's got to be a blue Lrig on your field, but then it will allow you to draw 3 cards at the end of your next turn, so not this current turn. The end of your next turn, you're going to have to discard 2 cards. So it's like it's just like a step better than Chime of the Blessed Key, and Chime of the Blessed Key is already a pretty good piece. The difference is that, and it's got attack phase and main phase timing, so you can use this in a pinch to try to grab some guards if you're like, oh, this is bad. Or if you've been like discarded to hell, you can use this to almost do a kind of Xeno cluster-esque effect. Now, if you have no cards in hand by the time the discard thing kicks in, then that's, it doesn't matter that you're going to have to discard cards. You have no cards to discard. And Ray does have a problem where it runs out of gas pretty quickly. A lot of its effects are draw, discard in this deck in order to get free turn-ons for your Ray's bottoming Signy ability. So this is kind of a way to get just like a burst of gas to get you to the finish line. But it also kind of works pretty well with Ray's last ability, which is you're discarding your hand. So if you are drawing 3 cards and you're going to have to discard your hand on the next turn anyways, you can very easily just discard your hand with Ray's once a game ability. Then you're going to make the opponent discard their hand too, and you guys are both at even Stevens, and hopefully you can keep that aggression up in order to win the game with them having no hand. The rest of the deck is actually, you'll notice a lot of it is not new. We have a secret rare, and that's going to be the chase card that you're after here. But the rest of it is basically things that you probably have lying around if you've played Wixoss and you have some staples. Burning Inferno, of course, always a good card to just get yourself some more lanes open. Nobunaga, you've got plenty of red choices here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 red choices. So you're going to find a target for Nobunaga. It's basically just Burning Inferno number 3, but the Double Crush sometimes does matter. And then we're going to play 2 Thrilling here, just to show you what Thrilling is. Thrilling is a spell that has no life burst, by the way. When you use a spell, you may exceed 4, and just since this is the first time we're ever talking about exceed, you can take 4 cards from underneath any of your Lrigs and put them in the Lrig trash, and then you can draw 2 cards and discard a card. Additionally, if you've paid exceed 4, draw 3 cards, you don't discard anything, right? So that's really great. It's another just way to get more gas in the gas tank for you to keep moving forward. And a lot of the times you'll find turn 1, you've got not the greatest hand. Turn 2, you're almost empty. Turn 3, you're completely empty. Turn 4 and 5, somehow you just have a full hand again. And that's very common with this Ray deck. You're playing some Haniels, mostly for the life burst, but also just to refuel that hand a little early game. Hajet is just a solid level 1 that sets you up for your later turns. For this Hajet, you're looking for either a Rose Quartz or the Firefly Squid, and we'll talk about Firefly Squid in a second. Then you're playing a multicolored, it can't get vanished by Ramel, which is a pretty good option. And then Regiclus, which is just a draw card, discard a card. You get to draw 2 cards on a life burst. That does matter at times. Very rarely does it matter for like the purposes of you shouldn't plan on it, but when you do get low hand-sized with this, your refilling is pretty good. Moving on, we got our, of course, 4 Servant Sharps. We have, in our 2 slot, you'll notice that there's actually more than 8, which is the normal number. And you'll notice that this is less than 16, aka the normal number. So, actually, no, it is more than 16. So you're set up to be fine. Let's count again. Hold on, I might not be saying that correctly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, so you're fine. Just, this deck really does need some defense on turn 1, so really mulligan hard to make sure you get your 1-drops. That was a big change I made to it at some point. But you do have more 2-drops here than normal, and you have less 3-drops than normal. The reason why is to support more spells. I always count Rise stuff as spells because they don't really count as Signies themselves, at least until you have actual Signies on the field. But yeah, you're playing the Lancelots, which are great just lane openers. Gagiel, which are awesome filler cards. Again, you're drawing 2 and discarding 2, which will turn on Ray, so just one of these turns on Ray. That's the whole point of it. There's a world where you might want some amount of Hijikatas in here because you're playing so much draw cards, discard cards, but that would be for you to decide. I actually decided I wanted things like Lancelot and Focalor more. Focalor's ability just coming in real clutch here I can only really fit in 2, can't really fit in more than that, but it's a very strong one. And then moving on to our level 3s, Rose Quartz, just really great top-end removal, and then part of what we build this deck around here, which is the Firefly Squid. Firefly Squid does the following. The Harmony is 1 white Lrig, and you'd have that. It's Akino here. At the beginning of your upkeep, or beginning of your attack, draw a card, right? So this will also help turn on Ray. If you play Ray, it will draw you a card and enter charge 1, and then if you play this on your attack phase, Ray will become active, as long as you make sure to stack the triggers so that way you have the draw card go first, and then this triggers. That's one of the reasons why it's a really good match. The other one is that once a turn, if you discard 1 or more cards by an effect, your opponent discards a card at random. This by itself can enable you to become sort of like the aggro tempo deck that you want to be here, right? Discard in it in itself is not necessarily control-based in Wixoss. It's also somewhat leans to aggression. You want to make sure you're vanishing Signy so that way they're running out of options in their hands. So discard also helps enable that. And a discard at random can always get a guard, which is always pretty good, as we know with this. The cool thing is that you don't have to work very hard to enable it. There's been times I've had 2 of these on the field, and I've just played like one Regiclus here, and then make my opponent discard 2 cards at random, and I hit a guard, and then their next level 3 play that they're going to go, and then it's the game's basically over. So it is, you can keep their hand basically gone between this and Ray's ability. And that's the deck in a nutshell with this one. This one leans to be a little bit more aggressive, so if you're coming off of No Limit and you want to try something a little bit more tricky, but you don't want to go full into sort of like a more tempo control aspect, this would be something I suggest. But if you like more tempo-based decks, then you could try this one out. It's slightly different, but the slightly different matters quite a bit, right? So we're still using the same setup here that we were using for the Lrig deck. Nothing has changed. This becomes less removal on your turn and more opponent's removal in order to stay alive longer. This will certainly go to turn 6-ish usually, but you'll see there's a way bigger emphasis on white now and less on red. Yes, we still have Lancelots, but the Lancelot isn't necessarily a red thing here. As you can see, it's colorless in order to lane open. We actually need quite a bit of white to fuel the, I think it's called Ghostfish. I gotta look it up in a second too. But these cards have a built-in combo with each other, and they're quite good together. So we've got Tobael also. It's just mostly there for the draw and discard, plus it's a 12,000. But we'll start at the top, right? We got Procyon, Natural Planet, which is just multicolored enter. You're gonna need quite a bit of white in this. At least enough to make white happen at least once in your game. You've got Xiao Yun, which is a sticky Signy. It's got Shadow, so it's not going to get removed very easily by Lancelots or Ramels. And then you've got Regicluses, which are just draw discards, so they help you filter. Again, you're looking for these cards up here. Gagiel will also help you get to these cards, plus, you know, Firefly Squid combos well with Gagiel and Regiclus, as well as you need 2 of them to trigger Ray, but it's not impossible. Sometimes you also play this just to dig a little bit deeper so you can get yourself some kind of removal or something and win the game based off of that. We got the Gagiel. Its life burst ability is quite good in this deck because now you're stalling a little bit more effectively. And then we have Rimlight. Now Rimlight's basically just folklore, but a white version, and again, we needed a little bit more white enter to fill in for Ghostfish here. Let's go to Rimlight. Boom. Code art Rimlight. Its life burst is up to 2 target Signies on your opponent's field until end of turn. They gain constant, can attack, draw a card. So the life burst does the same thing that Folklore is going to do, which is hopefully stop 2 Signy attacks. Then moving on to our 3s, again, we got that Tobiel. That's going to help you dig for guards, but it's also going to turn on Ray. It's also going to pair well with Firefly Squid. And then we have the Fishy. And the Fishy is Okay, Phantom, that's why I thought it was Ghost Fishy. It's Shiro Nakuji. Shiro Nakuji. Shiro Nakuji is a level 3, 10,000 power white Signy, but it has a constant that says, as long as there are more cards in your hand than the opponent's, this gets plus 1,000 power for each card difference. So really only need it to have 2 cards difference, but there are cases where your opponent's really starting to blow out of cards, and maybe you've made them discard quite a bit, and you're looking at a 15,000 power Signy. Now that's very good against black, because they can't power Reduct to kill it. And it's also quite good against red because they have things that will say power or less. But really, you're using it for this auto ability. At the beginning of your opponent's attack phase, if there's 6 cards in your hand, you get to draw a card. It's cool, you're going up to 7 cards now. That'll help you with your sort of filtering to make sure that you get there. It also feeds itself, right? It's just bigger. And since it's during your opponent's attack phase, it's going to be harder for them to kill it. And you get to keep the card, right? You get to keep the card to the next turn. That's very good. But you also have this once action, once a turn ability where you can pay white, discard 2 cards, aka you're feeding it with all the things that you're doing so far, target 1 Signy on your opponent's field, and put it into the trash, right? Something you could do, you can combo this pretty well with Array's ability, where the once a game is going to count how many blue cards you've discarded. So if you've got extra white cards, you can trash them to this effect before you do the discard your hand and open up a lane and then discard your hand and really strand your opponent out of options. Firefly's good, we already went over. It's very, very good. Thrilling, again, helps you fill up that gas, but then you're adding 4 random drain. Now, you're not going to be able to get the random discard off of it, but you're going to get a discard and a draw effect. Again, you can do things like a Regiclus plus a random drain to turn on Ray. So this is just an overall good card to have. Inevitably, you want to be a little bit more blue heavy, and this is a little less blue heavy, so you're risking it for the biscuit, but this is sort of your green, your blue, your white card sink in that respect. And overall, this plays actually quite well. So it does not win very well against aggressive-based decks, but most blue decks don't fare well against aggressive-based decks. This does incredibly well against any deck that is trying to be mid-range or control or stall, just because it just doesn't let them do their things, right? It vanishes stuff, it bottoms stuff, it puts stuff to the back to their hand. It does not care about size all that much. So if the opponent's putting walls in front of you, this just breaks straight through them. So like Nova, it's just like Nova, I don't think I've ever actually gotten a game won against Ray with Nova. It feels like I'm winning, and then suddenly I'm not anymore. And that's kind of how Ray goes. Ray's just like the ultimate wall breaker. So if your meta is incredibly aggressive, this might be not something you want to bring. But if you're seeing a lot of diagram, a lot of Uchu no Hajimari type style decks in there, then you want to consider this again. This is always a pretty good option in that case. And metas will inevitably start turning into this control beats aggro, aggro beats tempo, tempo beats control type of rock, paper meta. So this is the natural foil to it. So you will see just by the meta shaping into that rock, paper, scissors, this usage will go up. Either way, these are 2 great decks that you can use and bring to your local and probably have a fair chance at winning. If you guys would have any other changes that you think are good to it, or you want any other ideas, or you're just excited to use Ray, leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear more about what you guys think about these 2 decks.